Now, I know you're probably looking at the title and you're currently thinking to yourself, well, this is obvious. Of course Kirito wins. I mean, he's Kirito after all. Trust me, I initially thought the same as well when the idea of this fight initially struck me. But after I took some time to actually think about the specifics of it, the answer is actually not as immediately obvious as you would think it would be. So allow me to break it down for you, and explain just who would come out ahead in this battle between lovers. Generally, when I think about these hypothetical fights, I try to imagine it in the most realistic way possible as to how it can actually happen. I don't like to assume that characters will do things that are massively out of character for them to do simply because they have the ability to do it. That's uninteresting to me personally, as realistically, if the fight in question were to play out in the show, then the characters are going to stay in character and make decisions that are consistent with the behaviour that has been previously presented with them. An example of this is Gilgamesh in Fate. There are close to 0 scenarios in most fights that Gilgamesh would immediately destroy his opponent with Enema Elish. Even though that broken ass ability can one-shot most people, it is strongly established that both he is arrogant and that it's a weapon that you must earn his respect first before he will pull it out. So claiming that he would bring it out immediately in ordinary cases is just boring to me. Just because somebody has the ability to do something doesn't mean that they will then go and do it. With that established, moving forward, I think the first big thing we have to answer is where and when this fight could take place. I think it's the most interesting to take the most recent forms of the two combatants that we can. With that being said, however, there is not many, if any, opportunities or incentives for these two to fight in Alicization, as Asuna was not there for a lot of it, and when she was, Kirito was, well, you know, not fully there, as to say. Then after, during that 200-year period, they're mainly just kind of chilling and enjoying each other's loving company. We don't know the specifics of what happened in there after all, but I personally at least doubt that they dueled during that time. So I think the most likely time in which they would fight is shortly after the Mother's Rosario arc concludes. Every month in ALO, there is a dueling tournament that is held that is extremely popular and many strong players often participate in it. We also know from Mother's Rosario that both Asuna and Kirito enter these tournaments frequently, often placing well in them and even winning at times. Knowing this, it would actually be very likely that the two of them would meet in a match in one of these tournaments while they were advancing throughout the bracket. So now that we know the stage for the fight, we have to consider the fighters themselves. Let's start with Kirito first. With Kirito, I think the first thing we should address is the question of what equipment he would use. For this, there are a few different things to consider, the first of which would be whether or not Kirito would dual wield for the contest. The answer to that would almost certainly be no. Now let me explain why. In ALO, all the big damage is done by sword skills, of which dual blades have none. Sure, you can attempt to chain one-handed sword skills together in what Kirito dubs Skill Connect. However, the timing for being able to do that is extremely precise and unreliable. If you mess up the execution, which is actually somewhat likely, then you will suffer the momentary stun and sluggish effect that comes after using a sword skill. This drawback isn't so bad in PvE, as if you are in a party, then your fellow party members can cover for you in the event that you miss the window. That allows you to be able to take this gamble with some reassurance. However, in player versus player combat, attempting this would be near suicidal. The high chance of missing the window of execution means that you would more than likely end up stunned in the middle of the fight. Sword skills are usually not that easy to land in player combat. However, on a stun target it would be absolutely free. The opponent would easily hit you with their strongest sword skill, and more than likely 100 to 0 you right there and then. A solution to this issue would be to recreate all the dual blade skills via the original sword skill system. However, it is a Herculean endeavour, and thus far Kirito has only been able to recreate the most basic skills, nowhere near enough to warrant using the dual blades in PvP. For more information on the original sword skill system, you can check out the previous video I made on it through the link at the top of the screen. In terms of regular combat without using sword skills, there is some merit to using dual blades. The obvious one is having another weapon means there is potential for more damage. The other reason is the extra factor to think about in combat can be annoying to deal with and could potentially throw the opponent off. We know that sword fights in ALO outside of sword skills are unassisted by the system. This means that your skill with the blade is somewhat reflective of your skills in reality. I say somewhat because the avatars they pilot are still superhuman and therefore are capable of superhuman feats. Additionally, there is also some artificial boost in the form of skills, items, and certain stats, but for the most part, actual blade skill translates. It's a big factor as to why Leafa ranks amongst the best in ALO in PvP combat, as in reality she is very skilled in Kendo, and is able to transfer those skills to the game. We also know that in reality, using two swords at the same time is suboptimal for the most part. The short explanation as to why is because they get in the way of each other. This isn't as much of an issue for Kirito as he's used to the way in which the two blades move and interact with each other due to Aincrad, so he can get away with it in PvE and also probably against lower level opponents. But against other high level opponents it would become a handicap, as without sword skills it would be very hard to keep up with them and maneuver correctly. In that case, the biggest advantage would be initially catching the opposing player off guard with something that they have not encountered before, and thus are not used to fighting against it. But if Kirito does not manage to score a win during this initial period of confusion, then it could end up very badly for him, as they would more than likely adapt and gain the upper hand. Additionally, in this particular case, even that wouldn't be useful anyway, since Asuna is aware of the dual blades and has seen them many times in action, so she would not be caught off guard by the use of them. Furthermore, she talks about Kirito a lot about these things, and I'm sure she has conceptualized fighting against it before, so she might even have plans prepared to attack its weaknesses. When you consider all of this, you realize that in PvP, dual blades is pretty much just a risky, unreliable gimmick, which is probably why Kirito has never opted to go with them for any of his duels that we have seen so far. Now that we have eliminated the option of dual blades, we have to consider the option of Excalibur. It's the strongest weapon in his arsenal, and it has special properties, so surely he would use it, right? Well, actually no, he definitely would not. He has a bit of a personal complex when it comes to that sword, as he wasn't able to obtain it solely through his own power, but rather through the pooled strength together with his comrades. As such, he feels that he shouldn't use it for his own personal gain, hence why we have only seen him use it once, and that was to assist Asuna in achieving her goal with the Sleeping Knights. So we can safely assume that Kirito would go into this fight with his standard equipment using the custom-made black sword that Lisbeth made for him. Next is to assess Asuna. This one is a lot simpler, as the main question is which character would she use. She has her main character named Asuna, who is of the Undine race. This character is a rapier user and has split skills between the damage roll and the healing roll. Then she has her alternative character called Arika, who is of the Scythe race. This character uses daggers and specializes in melee. When faced with this choice, Mother's Rosario, when she was deciding which character she was going to fight a seemingly impossible battle with, she acknowledged that the latter would probably be more suited for duels. However, she still opted for the former due to having greater familiarity with it. A sound choice, as often one's performance is affected the most not by what is technically the best equipment, but the one in which you have the greatest comfort in using. As such, I presume she would make the same choice here, again in this tournament. This would be for the reasons I just outlined, but also because she only made that second character because she wanted to try out looking different, not because she felt like she lacked for combative prowess. Now that the forms of the two fighters have been confirmed, we can start looking into the fight itself. I think it's key to point out here that Kirito and Asuna have in fact fought each other before. This was during their time trapped in Aincrad. There was a disagreement between the leading guilds and the solo players on the front line as to how to handle the upcoming boss. In order to settle this disagreement, both sides agreed to let one representative for each of them fight each other in a duel. The victor would then decide how to proceed. Asuna represented the guilds and Kirito represented the solo players. Unlike what you might assume, this was not a quick stompy fight in favour of Kirito. In fact, it was actually very close and a competitive heated battle, taking over 10 minutes to fully resolve. Surprisingly, it didn't even resolve in one of them just straight up outplaying the other. Instead, during the engagement, Kirito did an extremely believable feint that Asuna fell for, so when she went on reflex to block the attack that never came, it left her wide open for Kirito to end the duel with a definitive strike. Echoing that sentiment, the duel would almost certainly start off with Asuna kicking off the ground hard and furiously charging down her opponent. This is how she starts off pretty much all of her duels, with the intention of overwhelming her opponent right from the get-go with a speedy flurry of thrusts. After all, they don't call her the Flash or the Berserker Healer for nothing. There is actually a chance that the duel would just end here if Kirito is careless. as Asuna remarked in her duel against Yuki that Kirito has been unable to block Asuna's full-powered thrust even a single time. Knowing this himself, Kirito would most likely opt to evade the attack, most likely either backwards or towards the air via flight, as if he were to go left or right then he would be caught by the follow-up thrusts from Asuna. At this point the two would just trade back and forth, slowly chipping away at each other, neither managing to land a significant strike while they look for openings to gain the upper hand. I think due to the nature of how Asuna fights with the constant stream of pressure and jabs, Kirito would mostly be on the back foot. Not in any significant danger of course, as he is more than capable enough to block, parry and evade the oncoming assault. However, the longer this stalemate goes, the more in favour it is for Asuna. When the Aincrad update hit for ALO, all the players from Sword Art Online had the option to transfer their character data over. Generally, most of the players from Sword Art Online that transferred over to ALO had high level characters, but this is mainly due to them just having played for a significantly longer time. As such, the HP pool for converted SAO characters is much higher than pretty much all the other ALO players. Asuna chose to convert her character from Aincrad, however Kirito reset his when the update hit. I have no doubt that he closed the gap somewhat during that time, but since Asuna has also been playing a lot at the same time that he has, there is no doubt that Kirito's HP pool would be significantly lower than Asuna's, meaning this war of attrition and chip damage will ultimately end in Asuna's favour. Knowing this, Kirito would have to take a risk in order to break the stalemate. Thus, I believe in response Kirito would try his best to get a sense for the flow of Asuna's attacks. Then, when he feels confident enough as to where the attack will come from, he'll put his full strength into parrying away that blow. This would be with the intent to knock her off posture and create an opening for him to use a sword skill. From that point, he would bet it all on whatever strongest sword skill he had that he could use from his current posture. The thought process being that even if it wasn't enough to finish Asuna, the resulting knockback from taking the blow should be enough for Kirito to recover from the temporary stun or sluggish effect that comes after using a significant sword skill. Seeing that Kirito has committed to a sword skill from his posture and his blade lighting up, Asuna would not try to futilely dodge the skill, and she also could not parry it from her position due to the earlier knockback. So instead, she would come to the same decision in which she came to in her fight against Yuki, and instead trade against Kirito with a sword skill of her own. Usually this is risky, as when trading sword skills, some hits would be parried and others would just be traded blow for blow depending on what sword skill is clashing with what. If you misjudge which sword skill to use against your opponent and they end up parrying all your hits as well as landing a blow, you'll be in a losing situation. But not only that, generally if the skills are equal, then the person going first has the advantage, as the cooldown for them would end quicker, thus giving them a chance to put you on the back foot at the very least, and in the worst case scenario they could maybe even land a significant strike during that time. However, Asuna has an option in her arsenal that nobody else has. That is, the strongest sword skill in the game, known as Mother's Rosario, that Yuki left behind for her. It's 11 hits, which is the longest sword skill that is currently in ALO. Knowing that information, Asuna would put her absolute confidence in it and use that skill to trade with Kirito. The two blades would exchange multiple blows at a flash of brilliant light, but soon Kirito's skill would end, and while he did do significant damage to Asuna, probably enough to even put her in the yellow zone at the very least, it would not be enough, as Asuna's sword skill had not run out yet. Kirito would only be able to stand there, hopelessly in the stun sluggish effect, while Asuna continuously rips into him with Mother's Rosario's remaining hits, ending the duel in a brilliant and flashy conclusion. I'm sure Yuki would be out there somewhere in the great beyond, smiling after seeing Asuna finish such an amazing duel with the skill that she entrusted to her. And so with that, I crown Asuna, the Flash, the Berserker healer, and now, the winner. Thank you all for watching. Of course this is all just my opinion based on the SEO lore and my interpretation of it. If you disagree, feel free to leave what you think might happen in the comment section below. But actually explain your reasoning. Don't just say something lame like, Kirito wins easy lol. I'll be sure to read and highlight all the interesting ones. It was a blast to think about this, and I hope that you guys managed to enjoy it as well. So please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to this channel for more content like this or on any of my other interests. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Goodbye.